So in this situation of chewing the cud, I'm going to show you something that I feel that Christians can take from this command that they had in their dietary laws. Hey guys, today we're going to talk about a law that you found in the dietary laws for Israel and how that can apply to us to us Christians today. And that's the subject of chewing the cud. Now, the Apostle Paul was speaking in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. We see in chapter 7, verse 6, he was speaking about marriage and saying he doesn't feel it's best for everybody to marry. But in this situation, he said, "By this I speak by permission and not of commandment." In other words, he was saying, no, this isn't a commandment of the Lord. I'm just telling you what I feel is best. But I'm not giving you a command of the Lord. I'm telling you what I feel is best. So in this situation of chewing the cud, I'm going to show you something that I feel that Christians can take from this command that they had in their dietary laws. In Leviticus 11, the writer was explaining to the children of Israel what they were able to eat and not able to eat. In verses 2 through 8, he explained that the mammals that they were able to eat were those animals that part the hoof or cloven footed, and they chew the cud. Now in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 6, the Apostle Paul said, "The things that happened to Israel were for our examples," our being Christian. So when we look at the things that happened in the Old Testament, although those things were specifically for Israel, there are principles that apply to us. Now, in Acts chapter 10, verses 9 through 6, we hear the story of the Apostle Peter when he had a vision with all kinds of wild beasts and a voice which told him to kill and eat 3 times. His response was in verse 14, "Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything common or unclean." He only ate the things that adhered to the law that was given to the children of Israel in terms of their diet. When Cornelius came there, we see that in verse 34 and 35, Peter perceived that God was showing him that salvation was open to the Gentiles as well. So the vision that Peter was seeing, it wasn't just about food. Basically, God was showing Peter who part of the church, and at this time, the church was Israel. It was Israeli. God was showing Peter that it had been opened to the Gentiles as well. And he showed him through that vision. In Galatians chapter 2, verses 11 through 15, the Apostle Paul, who was also Israelite, spoke about how he confronted the Apostle Peter because before certain men came from James, he was eating with the Gentiles. But after they came, he separated himself. So after that experience, we, if we go back, when we go to Romans and different passages like that, we will learn that we have, as believers, as Christians, we've died with Christ. Meaning what? Meaning when I get baptized, I'm testifying to the world that I've died with Christ. When I go down into those waters of baptism, I'm saying I've died with Christ. And now, when I come out of those waters, I should be walking in newness of life. The same thing with believers who had previously been Israelite. They may still be Israelite as far as their nationality, but as far as following the laws, those laws don't apply to them anymore. Why not? Because that old man is dead. And now the new man walks in the newness of life, and it's not by following the laws that he's trying to be righteous. We see that whole experience in Romans chapter 7 and how it ended in nothing but frustration. But it's by the Spirit of God indwelling and empowering us to live a life that's pleasing to God. And we see that transformation in Romans chapter 8. So now, living in the light of that, the Apostle Peter was eating with the Gentiles. He was no longer under the strict dietary law that was given to the Israelites. But after certain men came from James, Peter separated himself and started living like he was following the law of the Israelites again. And this is what the Apostle Paul was confronting him about. So if the dietary laws weren't literally and physically for Israel, who were they for? First, let's speak on chewing the cud is an old term. What would we call an animal that chews the cud today? An animal that chews the cud today is what we would call a ruminant. And a ruminant is an animal that has more than one stomach. It actually ingests what it's going to eat, starts eating it, and then sort of regurgitates it and brings it down into the other stomach and eats it even finer. So, how could we compare that today for us believers and even for believers in the Old Testament? Well, the comparison that we could have today is when we're thinking on things, when we're studying God's Word, are we just reading, which would be compared to an animal that's not a ruminant? Are we just looking through things briefly or just reading? Or are we meditating on the Word so we can get the deeper meaning? Joshua was told to meditate on the law day and night. That was in Joshua chapter 1, verse 8. The psalmist said the upright man meditates on God's law day and night. That's Psalms chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. And if you look up the word meditate throughout the Bible, you'll find a host of other situations and scriptures that talks about us doing that. So, in a principle, if we want to apply the principle of those animals that chew the cud, rather than just doing a swift reading of God's word, we would be spending time and meditating on his word to get the deeper understanding of it. Just as an animal that chews the cud digests finer than an animal with one stomach, there is a big difference between reading and meditating. Now, the other thing about this animal is that it was cloven footed, or it parts the hoof. What does the Bible have to say about our walk? And if we look through the Bible, and it points out many instances of our walk as believers and how it should be. Psalms 26:11 talks about walking in integrity. Psalms 119:3 talks about walking in God's ways. Ephesians 5:15, it tells us to walk circumspectly. So that is just some principles from the Old Testament dietary laws that we can apply to ourselves as believers, guys. Is that when we look at the Old Testament and we sort of dietary laws, the animals were cloven footed and they chewed the cud. Well, we can, in a sense, do the same thing, not with what we eat, but with who we are. We can meditate upon God's word, and we can have a sure and a circumspect walk. So that's it for this video, guys. I look forward to speaking to you in the next video. Have a great day.